truth has been covered up to such an extent by people you'd think would want to have the truth come out, but for very nefarious reasons, which Tim will go into detail on later, the only contrived history that we're getting is the idea, which is increasing daily, that God did not create us, that there is no God, that Jesus is not really who the Bible declares him to be, and that basically we're all generated and created by aliens dumping their waste or their DNA into the planet and watching us evolve. Fascinatingly enough, having been on the trail of biblical giants, this stuff is relevant. Again, I've said, Doug, you've heard me say it numerous times on your show, he who controls the past determines the future. So in other words, if you have the truth hidden, when you reveal the truth, you can basically publicly sway the non-thinking masses to believe anything you want to put, quote, contrived evidence for. I believe that God has raised us up and Gen 6 Productions for this time to challenge that. And you're going to hear an interesting phenomenon. By the way, if it hadn't been for a husband and wife team, Cam and Jan, God bless you guys, having the Lord speak to them literally about helping us in a big way, and I'm only saying this, we couldn't have done this. So it's interesting. Well, we're planning this and just believing God to provide the funding for this expedition, because we had one of the finest filmmakers, an action filmmaker, happens to be in Montana, guy who knows what it's like to go into the roughest parts of the world with Tim, and another gentleman that's been Tim's friend in Peru for a number of years, really a neat brother in the Lord. These guys set off on an expedition that was absolutely striking. You'll hear the details. But again, I just want to thank another brother sent us, a very lovely donations, and some people have sent us, and look, here's the deal. $50, $100 donation, thank you. I'm not begging for money. I'm just saying, by the grace of God, God will raise up the people to stand with us, because as you know, Doug, I've turned down numerous requests over the years, continually, almost monthly, to go on all the different giant shows, In Search of the Ancient Aliens. I mean, you can't name a History Channel or any of those type things that haven't contacted me, or British film crews wanting to do their spin on it. But it all boils down to the alien deception. So tonight we're going to take phone calls, but we want to thank those of you who I think will get excited to stand with us in this production, because right now Tim and Vinny, the cinematographer, got back, and they went to work editing this thing one day back. Tim was gone for 21 days. He's a father. He's got 4 children. So, I mean, he's dedicating his life to this. So with no further ado, I'll have Tim lay out why Peru is so critical to understanding the whole giant revelation in the book of Genesis and all through the Old Testament, and why it's going to play so heavily into the importance of people understanding this. See, this isn't a history lesson per se. This is a story of God's infinite love for his creation and having protected us from these beings and entities. But as men work harder and harder to unleash the very gates of hell, or actually loose the gates of hell, and unleash these things that God had basically bound for our protection, we're in for a whole different world. And I just want to say one thing about the Kathmandu earthquake in Nepal. It's interesting that we've talked about CERN on your program, Doug, and one of the first things that got toppled in the main city over there, I believe it was in Kathmandu, was the temple of Shiva. Shiva's the destroyer, the cosmic dance of death. And isn't it ironic that CERN kicks on, and the very first thing to be destroyed is Shiva? Now, in the world of the occult, they'll take that as meaning the cosmic dance of death has begun. What that simply means is they are out to destroy the old world to bring about the Luciferian new world. But in order to understand the future, you must get a grasp on the past. So, Tim, go ahead and take it, and, when you need a breath or whatever, give it back to me, but please take your liberty, take your time, lay it out, and let's just start by telling the people how literally, Peru is, if you will, the key to unlocking the whole mystery of the giants and what you guys found on your expedition.
Well, good evening, gentlemen. this was our first. Basically, this was our second expedition for Gen 6 Productions. The first one we went to Sardinia, and that one just happened really quickly. That was off the cuff. We've been planning this one to Peru for a long time. We knew that we had to go to Peru. I lived there, so I'm very familiar with the country. Speak the language, which is Spanish, and you know, Peru's basically been the focal point for a lot of these programs on television concerning the ancient world, ancient technology, ancient aliens, and so forth. So so it made sense. It was logical to us to go there to one of our first expeditions to make it Peru. We kind of knew what we were aiming for when we set out, which was evidence of the antediluvian giants and, you know, the whole situation with the fallen angels. And I can tell you right off the bat that there is certainly that in Peru. I mean, that can be found without a doubt. The documentary we're actually editing now is going to show that there's some very strange things going on. So yeah, we were a team of three. We've been trying to keep our expedition team small, compact, so we can move quickly, kind of fly under the radar. And that was our strategy going in, and I'm glad that it was, because we got into some pretty hairy situations that we needed to, work our way out of, and it would have been difficult if we had a full production team with us. So, so basically, we started off around Lake Titicaca. We went straight to what's called the Altiplano. The Altiplano is it's the Andean high plateau. Mainly spanning the border of Bolivia and Peru, and it is the second highest plateau in the world. I mean, the first is Tibet, and this is the Altiplano is the second. Most of the time, we were over 12,500 feet. Just even where we were staying, the cities we were in. That's without even hiking up any mountains. It's just that the Altiplano is almost 13,000 feet above sea level. So it's a very, very interesting place. As soon as you get there, you notice some very bizarre things going on. For one thing, you're above the tree line, and there's very little animals. There's very little life at all. There's not even really hardly any insects, no mosquitoes, hardly any flies at all. You get it's a very desolate sort of feeling up there. But when you start getting out and around Puno, especially when you head down south towards the Bolivian border, you start to notice some very strange things if you know what to look for. Obviously, our Gen 6 team having the narrative of Gen 6 in our minds, as we always do wherever we go. In other words, fallen angels, the pre-flood world, giants, all that kind of stuff. We're always looking for very particular artifacts, very particular signs that tell us that we're in an area that might have been occupied. And one of those things is a lot of interesting symmetry out in the landscape, and that's something that we definitely discovered in Sardinia, and it's certainly apparent in the Altiplano of Peru and Bolivia. There's a lot of terracing on the mountains around the area. There's actually a whole lot of terracing. In other words, somebody cut into the side of the mountains the different levels for growing, the stepped levels for growing crops. And these terraces, you'll hear like on the Discovery Channel, on the History Channel, they'll tell you that they were built by the Inca. But when you actually get out there, this is something that we discovered. By the way, Steve, I'm just going to ramble on. If you want me to point me in a particular direction, if you want me to hit particular points.
Well, yeah, I think, Tim, let's basically talk. Let's just go straight. And you know me, I always like the bottom line. We'll work backward and take questions. But one of the most interesting things was share about while you were at Amaramuru and what that is, and just that whole situation, because I explained to Doug, what's a chance that we have a film crew at a known Stargate, and then let's take it from there, because in order, Doug, for people to get a grasp on this instead of just, jumping around, believe it or not, I'm going to try and be linear tonight. The point is that where you have the reference of giants, where you have the architecture of giants, where you have the oral tradition of giants and the bones of giants, where you have all that, you usually are in an area of a known portal or a gate. And so, Tim, share just that whole, and share, give people an understanding, because, well, Tim was there. I've shared this on your show and other shows for years on Coast to Coast, but the way that I was told that the gates work by people who evidently can work them, go through them, and whether you believe that's possible or not, when you're talking about top secret military bases and top secret military units that exist only known to each other or known to those they reveal themselves to, beyond top secret, magic, cosmic clearance. Those of you listening to us will understand this who have those clearances. The thing that we wanted to do was to go to Amaramuru. Did I say it right, Tim?
Yeah, that's one of the ways you can say it.
That's as close as I know how to get. And I want you to explain where it was, what it is, why we picked on that as one of the original, or picked that as one of the original locations. And then I want you to share, if you will, share all of the ceremonies of the shamans. Those would be the equivalent of witch doctors, holy men, spiritists, etc. And then what happened to you that night? Because I think that's fascinating. And when you're done with that, I'll explain what I think happened based on who was following you and in real time. I believe I can build the case, and you'll see this, that while Tim and Benny and Vinny were all in, camped out in an area waiting for gate activity, based on what the natives and others had told them, that somebody who was spying on them with top secret spy satellites made sure that they were interfering by sending one of the most amazing localized and focused storms. But go ahead, Tim. Now you share what it is, why we went there, and what we got on film. And by the way, ladies and gentlemen, all this stuff is going to be available in a 60-minute, 90-minute DVD, but it's going to be different than anything that you've ever seen. And these are actually being produced for a television sequence of 6 of them that will be shown on a Roku channel that we're working on, and also on Tom Horn's Skywatch. And there's some other places that I met with. I flew to be with Tom Horn last weekend. I guess just yesterday I came home and went out there on Thursday or Friday, and we covered a lot of ground. But here's the thing. Where Tim is critical to understanding the rest of this. And then, Tim, I want to get you into from here, I want to take it to the fact that the most well-known artifacts that von Daniken and all the Alien series use, they absolutely move those, Doug, from one place to another. In other words, there's the difference between pre-flood architecture and post-flood. But, Tim, go to Amaramuro, to Stargate, and just lay it out, what you observed there and what happened that night.
Okay, Aramamuru. Real quick to finish up what I was saying, because it connects to Aramamuru, all the terracing I was referencing gave us an indication right away that there was a very large civilization that once lived in the Altiplano, and everybody claims it was Inca, but when you actually get there, you talk to the archaeologists, you talk to the engineers, you talk to the professionals, they all say no, pre-Inca. So I think that there's a very large antediluvian civilization living there. So the Aramamuru situation, we had heard about that about a year ago, and obviously we're interested in Stargate. So this was an area that was alleged to be an active portal, someplace that things are still coming out and going into this thing. So we decided to go down there and investigate it. That was one of our primary objectives. And basically, the gate, this particular place, which is now called Aramamuru, is located right outside of the little town of Huli on the banks of Lake Titicaca. And you could Google Earth Huli in the Puno province of Peru, and you'll actually see a marker on the Google map that says Aramamuru. That's the location. Anyways, we went over there, and this, to describe it for people who don't know what it is, this is it's a door or a gate of some kind that has been carved into the face of what appears to be sandstone. I haven't confirmed that yet, but it appears to be red sandstone. So somebody carved this gate or this door into the rock, and basically there's not much known about it except for the fact that it's very old and nobody knows who did it or why for sure. But the ancient legend is, and we were able to confirm this with the natives, that it was some kind of a portal. It was thought to have been a portal. In fact, the Incas certainly associated it with some kind of a portal, and they didn't build it, by the way, but because they, during the time of the Incas, the Spaniards, the Spanish priests, dissuaded the people from doing their ceremonies and from reverencing the gate of Aramumudu. It wasn't called Aramumudu back then, but the Spaniard priests actually changed the name to the Gate of the Devil. And so basically in the time of the Incas, it was known as the Devil's Gate or the Gate of the Devil. And precisely because there was a lot of demonic activity associated with it. It was said that it was a portal to a demonic realm, maybe even to hell, and that demonic things went in and came out of it. So it was known as the Gate of the Devil. And basically that name, we found this out, by the way, when we went there. We were actually finding all of this out, doing the research when we were there. And it has come to be called Aramumudu recently, basically back to the mid-'90s. So that name was kind of superimposed over the site by a tour guide over there. He's a shaman. They call him apus in Peru and Bolivia, but the more common term for us is shaman. And he's a tour guide. He owns a hotel, and he wanted to kind of build a touristic situation around this obscure location that people didn't really know about in the 90s. So that's exactly what he did. And he created, basically, some legends were superimposed over this place. And we found that out very quickly. There's a lot of New Age influence there, a whole lot of New Age influence there. So we had to sift through what was indigenous and what was contrived. Basically, what was old legend and what was new concoctions that the New Age community has devised concerning the Aramumudu location. The name Aramumudu basically it comes from a book that was written in the 80s or 90s by a well-known New Age guy. His name escapes me right now, but his claim was that the gate, the alleged Stargate, was a portal to Muria. So, of course, Muria was closely associated to Atlantis. So basically, Muria, Atlantis, that was a portal, a gateway to Muria and Atlantis. Now, it could be that this individual was, in fact, correct. There is reason to believe that he might have been correct in that assumption. I believe he channeled the information from some kind of spirits or something like that. But anyway, the point is that the natives themselves, interestingly enough, they maintain that basically all of these New Age people have come and brought their own legends, but they maintain their own legends that come down from their grandparents and their grandparents' grandparents and generations back. So that was what I was most interested in. I wanted to know what the native community thought about that place. So the native community is literally, I would say within a mile of the actual carving in the face of the rock wall, and they all speak Aymara. The elderly people in the community do not speak Spanish. They only speak Aymara. Aymara is the indigenous language, and in fact they're called the Aymara. The people are called the Aymara natives, and that's also the name of their language. So we had with us an individual who spoke Aymara, so we were able to speak to some of the people. We got that on film. And right away, one of the first ladies that we spoke to was in her late 70s or early 80s. I can't remember, but she was pretty old. And she only spoke Aymara. And immediately she confirmed one of the legends that I had heard doing research here in the United States. She confirmed that when she was a little girl, her grandparents told her a story, and this is a well-known story. This is a very ancient story that goes all the way back to the Incas, of a group of musicians that were passing by the Aramumudu gate, playing their instruments. They were dancing and playing their instruments for some reason, passing by the gate. And I've heard different variations of this story, but in a nutshell, the gate opened. It was triggered by their instruments. So in other words, some kind of a frequency, some kind of a harmonic resonance triggered the gate. And some of the people say that one of the musicians got sucked into the gate. Others say the entire group got sucked into the gate and disappeared, was never heard from again. So that's a very well-known, ancient, verifiable legend concerning Aramumudu. But again, the Aymara people do not call the place Amarumudu. They know it as the gate of the devil. That's the name that they know that location as. It is to them the gate or the doorway of the devil. To the outsiders who come in, it's Aramumudu. To the tourists, it's Aramumudu. We found that out. So basically, our objective at the Gen 6 team, our objective was to literally camp out in front of this thing. We wanted to spend the night there. We had heard rumors that there's more activity at nighttime. People have seen orbs. There's been UFOs reported right over that area. There's been strange people reported, very white-skinned, really bright blue eyes, tall, white hair, typically what people refer to as the Nordics, for people who are familiar with ufology, have been spotted around the area, and always at nighttime. So we figured if we're going to have a chance of seeing anything, then we better be there all night. And so we literally camped out in front of this thing. When we got there, there was a group of shamans there. Again, they're called Apus in Peru, and they were doing a ceremony at the gate, which is a very common thing these days, because there's lots of tourists that come and they go, and people believe that it's an energy source. There's a bunch of different beliefs about this place, but most people agree that it's like an energy vortex of some kind, and they do their shamanic rituals there. And they were using, interestingly enough, harmonic frequencies at the gate. They were using symbols, and they were using, I don't know if you know the name of that thing I showed you, Steve, where they're with the bowl, they're running that thing around the bowl. I don't know the name of that thing.
Well, let me
but
just
it makes
help
a very
you here.
strong resonance.
Yeah, it's really interesting, ladies and gentlemen, because when all of these worldwide references to Stargate's portals, even in the desert southwest, Kokopele, you'll see it on the petroglyphs, the stone carvings, a little caricature blowing a flute. It's fascinating that so many of the Kokopele representations in the Stargates basically have to do with the spirals, and Tim will talk to the spiral, but it was obvious that the shamans knew that somehow they were trying to communicate with that which is behind the gate. Now, imagine this. Well, these guys are down there, Tim and the crew. We've got CERN kicking up from 3 trillion electron volts to volts, 6 trillion electron volts, and we've got this interesting phenomenon taking place around the world where more earthquakes are taking place, and big earthquakes, in a very short period of time. So it's my contention, and I think I lay this out in my book, Little Creatures on Stargates, about that sound is very important. Now, we won't get into it tonight, but you can build a case for 440A, and you can also build a case for many, not all rock and roll music, and not all forms of rock and roll music are in the same category, but the summoning of the, if you want to call them angels, demons, and they're different entities. The point being is, while Tim and the crew were there, they saw firsthand the integration of sound and the shamans trying to open up that which was beyond the gate. Now, Tim, if you would, get into the storm, because this will relate directly to where we're going to go next with the spiral on the ground and everything else.
Okay. Yeah, so our objective was to stay there, obviously, all night, and we wanted to keep our cameras on the gate, especially at 12 o'clock at night. So around 9 o'clock at night, after the shamans left, cleared out, we shot some footage, shot some sequences there. After the shamans cleared out, we started walking around. I was told that there's a lot of magnetic anomalies. In fact, I was told this by a very well-known, respected archaeologist in Puno. He told me that he had registered some very strange magnetic phenomenon with his compass, that it would go haywire in certain locations. So I was walking around in the evening and after sundown with the compass, and we got this on camera, looking for any magnetic anomalies. We didn't find any, but we didn't have a chance to walk over the entire area, precisely because sometime around 8 o'clock or 9 o'clock at night, it started to rain, and so we got in the tent, set our camera up on the gate, and periodically we'd take a look outside and turn our flashlight on and check our camera equipment, everything like that. But what happened was a storm moved in on us really, really quickly. We were just sitting inside the tent. At first it was a little bit of rain, but then all of a sudden it just began to hail, and it was really, really strong hail. I mean, it was a powerful hail coming down really hard, very dense, and just pummeling the tent we were in. In fact, it was so loud that we had to shout to each other inside of the tent. All three of us were in the tent to talk to each other. That's how loud the hail was on the tent. And usually, like here in Montana, it hails a lot, and it usually only hails for 15 minutes, half an hour max. But this hail lasted, I would say, it hailed off and on all night long, but this really strong, constant hail fell, I would say, for over an hour. It's hard. I wasn't really counting the time, but definitely over half an hour, because we were definitely expecting it to stop, kind of keeping track of the time for about a half an hour. And when it didn't stop, we started to get pretty concerned, because it was actually intensifying, and we were concerned that it was going to bust a hole in the tent. And the hail was probably, maybe marble size, and maybe at the biggest marble size. And we were concerned that obviously if the grains were going to be getting bigger, we would have been in big trouble, because we were exposed. There wasn't really anywhere we could get out of the hail. There wasn't any caves or anything like that. So we were completely exposed. If our tent would have busted, we would have been in a lot of pain. It would have been like being stoned to death, basically. I don't think the hail wasn't big enough, I don't think, to kill us, certainly to hurt us. But our van, we had a van that was parked all the way around the rock formation. So it's probably about 150, 200 yards to get to our van. So at one point, when we were in the tent just being pounded by this hail, we had to consider an exit strategy to get out of there if the hail got bigger, or if it started falling harder and started to penetrate through the tent. Because again, it was fall. I've never been in hail like this. Again, it hails a lot in Montana, but this was crazy. The density of this hail, the constant falling of this hail. There was no remission for over an hour, and we got some of this on video. When it was done, when the main blast of hail subsided, we zipped up the tent and took a look outside, and there was a few inches of hail on the ground, as if it had snowed, but it was hail. So it dumped a lot of hail on us. Again, definitely for over half an hour, and I'm pretty certain for at least an hour, just dumping hail on us.
Well, and I think hey, Tim, let make it clear, too, that even the natives were surprised, because it seemed to be very localized in your area. The reason I'm saying this, Doug, and I'm trying to paint a picture, is because when electromagnetic disturbances take place, obviously the natives, this is what Tim related to me, I was not there, that they basically were surprised at the intensity of the storm being so localized over these guys' tent, okay? Now, Tim is watching his compass to see the electromagnetic anomaly, and obviously something's generating a very, very, when I say almost pinpoint localized storm, and the natives themselves had to come, the following morning and dig you guys and pull you out, correct?
Yeah.
So
it was a rough night. It was a rough night for the Gen 6 team. Let's just put it that way. Yeah. I don't think we slept at all. I mean, it would. Go ahead.
Well, yeah, I think that it's critical to understand. Now, from there, you went to explain the difference, and I want to get, again, because we're going to take questions and stuff, but I want to get to the difference between the pre-flood architecture and the post-flood architecture, and go right into the, obviously some of the findings that no one to date has ever brought out, because I want people to understand we're not just going down there to do what everybody else is doing. And later on the show, we'll get to what I believe was one of the gentlemen that was supposed to take Tim and the crew to an area where the bones are up in the cloud forest, and I believe the guy was tampered with. And I'll tell you why when we get there. But, Tim, tell people about, I think it's really important because all these history shows, and Von Däniken, Charity of the Gods, and all the books out there, especially the New Agers, they're not really showing the whole area and how close the old architectures to the new, and how basically part of it's designed just for the tourists to see, but the really good stuff and interesting stuff is off limits, and basically they're doing their best to keep you out of where the good stuff was. Explain, the gateway to the sun and how it had been replaced or, repositioned from where it would have been, and we'll go into the difference between antediluvian, in other words, prior to the flood of Noah, and after the flood of Noah, the architecture, and, to go into the engineer's comment to you.
Okay. We met up with an engineer in Puno and an archaeologist. Very well-known both of them work in both of them are professors in the university, the National University in Puno. And basically the next day we went to Puno with the engineer. He went with us. He went with us to Tiwanaku. Tiwanaku is located right across the Bolivian-Peru border. It's on the Bolivian side. The engineer's name is Mario, and Mario's done his own investigations into the building techniques and anomalies that are found in the region, in the entire Altiplano, and all throughout Peru and all throughout the world as well. And being an engineer, he's very interested in it, very interested in trying to decipher how in the world ancient cultures were able to construct things that our modern engineers have a hard time even figuring out today. And in some cases, we cannot replicate, we cannot duplicate what some of these ancient people did. And so we took him with us. He had a theory that correlated with our own theory, which is that we believe that that whoever was building these ancient constructions, obviously antediluvian races that were under the teaching or using the knowledge and technology that was brought from the fallen angels, most likely giants building most of this stuff, that they were able to somehow change the molecular or the atomic structure of the stones, make them soft, levitate them, do all kinds of things with them in order to work with gigantic, 200-ton stones and place them with precision that is mind-blowing. So there's a lot of this in Peru. And so this engineer Mario went with us, and his theory was exactly that. Having done his own studies, he came to the conclusion that the ancients knew how to change the molecular structure of the rocks. That's exactly what he told me. I said nothing to him, by the way. This was his theory when I asked him how he thought some of this stuff was built when I first talked to him, when I first met him. That was his own theory, and again, that correlated exactly with our theory on how the ancients were able to do this. And it was confirmed, by the way, three times in total, by three different sources for us. that this is in fact what was going on. So basically, and I think in the video that in the documentary that's coming out, I think I make a really strong case for it, and I think I show some evidence that's going to be very compelling to people to at least consider that theory. So he went with us. We went to Tiwanaku. Tiwanaku, we crossed the Peruvian-Bolivian border. That in itself was a little adventure. I do not recommend that people who want to go see Tiwanaku cross the Peruvian-Bolivian border by Lake Titicaca. It's basically a den of rats over there when you cross that border. We had the government following us as soon as we crossed the border into Bolivia, because we were bringing some cameras and some tripods and things of that nature. We didn't even have that much gear. We were trying to fly under the radar, and we had one large duffel bag with gear in it, and it was not easy getting it into the country. One of the first things that you'll find out in Bolivia is they do not want you. They don't even like you taking photos, but they definitely don't want you taking video of anything. They don't want you taking footage of anything. They're very hardcore about it. And so we had eyes on us from the moment we walked across the border in Bolivia. And for people who are not familiar with Bolivia, this was my first visit to Bolivia. I figured that Bolivia and Peru would be very similar. I was wrong. It was like two different worlds. Crossing from Peru, which is very friendly to tourists. A major part of the economy is tourism. They love outsiders coming in, especially Americans. You're treated very well. When you cross the border into Bolivia, all of that ends. When you cross the border into Bolivia, you are not wanted. You're tolerated in Bolivia. You're not received with any kind of approval or joy, for sure. I mean, you're tolerated. Your presence is merely tolerated, and it's a very bizarre, surreal situation. It's the best that I can describe it, although I've never been there, is North Korea. I think it's the closest that I'll ever come to being in North Korea, being in Bolivia. That's how bad it was for us. We had eyes on us. We had people following us. We were very uncomfortable the whole time. We felt like we were being listened to and watched the entire time as soon as we crossed that border into Bolivia. So Tiwanaku, the famous area, for those who are familiar with the Ancient Aliens series on, I think it's the History Channel, they do a lot of stuff in Tiwanaku. They make a big deal about Tiwanaku. A lot of guys have gone there and used Tiwanaku, the whole Tiwanaku area, as supporting evidence for their ancient astronauts theory. So we wanted to go there ourselves with a biblical perspective and take a look at it and film and do our own analysis of what we found. And what we found was just as astounding, if not more astounding, than what you see on television. We realized right off the bat that the whole Tiwanaku area is locked down and controlled. It's like a police state when you walk into that place. I mean, all of Bolivia is like a police state, but when you go to Tiwanaku, you are in very unfriendly territory. Just recently, about 5 months ago, they decided to clamp down even tighter in Tiwanaku. They introduced ropes, and they introduced more laws, more regulations for tourists. You're not allowed to even touch the rocks anymore. For example, in Pumapunku, which is a part of Tiwanaku. Now, let me explain this. Tiwanaku, there's a bunch of different ways to say this stuff. You'll hear it pronounced differently, said differently, and written differently on all the different shows that feature it. Even in Bolivia, people say it differently. So it's really confusing. The whole area is called Tiwanaku. When you pull up to it, it's called Tiwanaku. Now, the town there's a town right there, right in the area where all these ruins are. The town is called Tiwanaku. So the town's called Tiwanaku. All the ruins are referred to as Tiwanaku. So it's very confusing. And then within the ruins, there's different areas. There's Pumapunku, which is the most famous area and the most impressive. And then there is the other side, which is often just referred to as Tiwanaku. So So it's very confusing, and I didn't know any of this going in because this was never made clear on any of the programs I've seen. And I'd seen all the Ancient Alien stuff and a lot of these guys, the little productions that they've done on their own. Some of these guys that are featured in Ancient Aliens, and it's a very different situation than what you're led to believe on television, at least the impression that you're given. One thing that they definitely never have shown is how oppressive it is. I mean, it is extremely oppressive. The whole Tiwanaku area is oppressive. You just have an oppressive feeling there. Again, you're being watched. You feel like you're hated. They hate you. By the way, Americans have to pay $100 extra just to get into Bolivia because they especially don't like Americans. So they really let you know that when you're there. For example, they told us that.
Tim, yep. Let me interrupt here too, ladies and gentlemen. Even today in Bolivia just signed a deal with Russia for 20 state-of-the-art fighters. The president of Bolivia has no love lost for the Americans, but I need to give a little background to him. What's happened in Bolivia, in the specific area Tim's talking about, is there's a whole new dig that's been found of underground pyramid structures. Now, for Doug, as long as I've been on talk radio, you've heard me enough to know, I've told everybody, it's not what you see above ground. It's what you see underground, or for more importantly, what they won't let you see underground. It's true all over the world. Now, why I brought up the Russia card is this. I was told, I've said this so many times, I don't mean to sound like a broken record, but this will explain. Tim, your actual words were, it's like a bunch of Gestapo there. Those were your words. And yep. I think what people need to understand is that they have, from the even 2 years ago, the security and the direction that tourists are even allowed to go has changed dramatically. I call it the inverse liar's lie, okay? That's a new term for you tonight, Doug. The inverse liar's lie. The more of the truth they uncover, the more they have to lie. And in order to protect that, they'll now go to any extreme to make sure you don't see anything you're not supposed to see. You don't film anything you're not supposed to film. And, Tim, I want you to deal with how they actually moved the Temple of the Sun from the older. I think people are. I don't want them to miss this. This is critical. In other words, they have moved it or staged it, placed it on a platform that's a whole different post-flood set of archaeological findings, and the old, because of the relationship to the old, the forbidden zone, if you call it that, in Bolivia, they don't want two and two put together. Now, spell out for people the difference between antediluvian and post-diluvian from how you saw it and how you'll be describing it in the video. Because this video, ladies and gentlemen, we're trusting that anybody who gets a video is going to understand the biblical response, the twisting of secular history, the New World Order's spin on the ancient aliens, and we'll explain later on the show how the Catholic Church, and look, this isn't an anti-Catholic statement, but how everywhere we went, the Catholic Church has been absolutely